Hello, I'm Peter Bell, and I'm here with Mr. Ian Berzins of Braveheart Resources. Hello, Ian.
Good afternoon, Peter.
Nice to talk to you for the first time here today. Looking at an October 2020 pitch deck from the company here. Thanks, Jerry, for putting it on my radar. I'm pretty impressed by the story, Ian.
Yeah, no, I think we've got one of the more compelling stories in the Canadian junior resource mining space.
I love to hear about a mine coming out of bankruptcy and stuff too. The amount of work that goes into that, the foresight, a lot of planning, and it seems like fortuitous timing maybe with the deal being public now.
Yeah, well, we've really done this. This is not quite a rinse and repeat, but it's certainly back in January 2019, we saw a unique opportunity to acquire past producing Bull River mine, which was copper, gold, and silver. And as mining guys, we're looking at opportunities that can have near-term production and arguably near-term cash flow. So we have today our flagship project is still the Bull River project, which we hope to have in production next summer. And then we recently announced a definitive agreement to acquire what's called the Terry copper nickel deposit in Pickle Lake, Ontario, Canada. And that one has, as well as the primary copper with some nickel, but also PGM group of metals, primarily palladium is what excites me there. So both projects have past production, both are close proximity to existing infrastructure and communities, including roads and grid power. So very similar projects, but the Terry deposit is about 5 or 10 times larger than Bull River. So it's going to be a nice backup or second project once we get Bull River up and running.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you. Let me skip around a little bit in the deck here. There was one slide kind of at the end here that I wanted to jump to, right? I think it was this one. And, to see some of the property, plant, and equipment that you have at the Bull River site, just wonderful. So much that comes along with that. And it was this section. Yeah. So it was the Terry mine that jumped out at me as well. I can see why, you definitely want to put this thing up next. Some impressive numbers there. Wow.
Yeah, yeah, Peter. So, I mean, to me, if I look at just highlights on Terry, it was mined successfully by Umex, which is a Belgian mining company between 1976 and 82 for a continuous period. They actually had 2 open pits and they went underground with significant developments. So we have a shaft there with tunneling. So we have not only a decline, but also a shaft once we decide to dewater. But what I find interesting is we've got about 8.8 million tons in an indicated category, measured and indicated category, with similar copper grades to what we have at Bull River, and pretty significant palladium at 0.13. There's also a large inferred resource of about 15 million that has similar grades. So the underground on its own is quite interesting. And then we also have with the package 54 million tons at a 0.38 copper. So it may not sound that's an open pit or open pitable project within a couple of kilometers of the underground. So I would envision that, in BC copper mines, typically the Gibraltars and the Copper Mountains are in around 0.35% copper. So the other metals that come along with it actually take the equivalent copper closer to about 0.75. So we just think it's a really interesting project. The metal value just in the M&I alone is about 1.3 billion. So we're trying to acquire this for under 200 million Canadian.
Well done. And noteworthy that it was mined in the past. So, that question about metallurgy, off the
Yeah,
bat.
So there, I mean, certainly we want to use some technology to our advantage. At the time in 1976 to 82, palladium prices were down between $50 to $100 an ounce. Now we're at 2,200 to 2,300. So it changes the dynamic. They did, UMEX struggled a little bit with the recovery of nickel. They had significant nickel, but they didn't recover a lot of it. Copper, they got, I think, over 90%. So there are likely some things metallurgically we could do, 20, 30 years different to focus on trying to optimize the other elements other than just the copper. And at the time, UMEX was sending the product to northern or northeastern Ontario, the Horn smelter, sort of Quebec. It's sent to Quebec, the Horn smelter. And, again, it's one of these questions whether or not they had particularly good smelter agreements. That smelter is no longer available to us, but I think there are certainly metallurgical opportunities. And one of the things that I get excited about is that the use of what's called ore sorting or pre-concentration
Oh yeah.
could be attributable here. So you'd actually be taking your feed grade to a higher, let's say 50% higher feed grade to the mill, meaning that could impact the size of the mill that you'd have to build.
Wonderful. Yeah, there's so much you can do. And the new technology, with the visual identification and some of the XRF scanning, I don't know what they're using for the sorting. That's powerful stuff. I wonder about some of the old stuff like the shaker tables too, if some of those could be useful for some pre-con, gravity circuit type things.
Well, certainly we've had preliminary discussions with companies like Steiner that make they make their machines. And again, we'd have to try to pick the right type of machine for our ore types, but certainly copper ores are amenable to that technology, much as let's say gold or diamond feeds would be.
And yet people don't seem to be widely aware of that. So
I,
good to
I
have
think
some.
yeah, I think it's changing. Frankly, in Australia seems to be more of a leader. They're
Yep.
probably 5 years ahead of North America. And the other challenge is that once your mill is built, it's somewhat more difficult to introduce that stage, if you will. Whereas if you're going to be designing your mill outright, you can build it in the front end of the mill, and then obviously reject non-economic material before it hits the grinding circuit, where really is the most significant power costs.
Well, I think about, you mentioned Gibraltar and how different I'm sure the circuit would look if that was designed in 2020 versus 50 years ago or whatever it was, right? When they
Yeah,
impressive
and I think
mind there, but
Yeah, the other thing that's happened with a lot of us, I was at Thompson Creek, and both Mount Milligan and Gibraltar, well, Mount Milligan and Copper Mountain had to introduce secondary crushing in order to come close to optimizing the capacity of the SAG mill. So yeah, we'll have the opportunity to try to integrate some technology into a new mine design. And the previous owner, which is currently Cadillac, they were envisioning a 15,000 ton a day operation with about 11 from the open pit and 5,000 or 4,000 from the underground. We would be more focusing on a 4,000 ton a day underground operation, which would reduce the capital that one would have to invest in order to get into positive cash.
great. Glad to hear it. Rationalize, rationalize, rationalize. Right size these projects, these billion-dollar capex that just sit and miss a cycle in the
Yes.
markets. It's an unacceptable thing, really. And we've seen it happen before so many times that if we can learn from other people's mistakes and have things that are stand on their own, please. That's what I want to hear about. Absolutely. But most juniors, they don't have the bench strength of the people involved who really know much about production. So those decisions are kind of just they say, oh, the consultants told us to do the mine like this, the mine plan, so this is what we're going to do. Glad to hear you talking about some adult supervision there, maybe from management side.
Well, the other interesting thing at both operations, the Bull River has about $150 million in tax pools, and the Terry mine has about 100. So we think that those are really nice attributes to have. That's why we bought in both cases, we're purchasing the subsidiary companies as compared to the assets.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that to do a PEA on a project as large as the Terry, excuse me, typically you'd be between $250,000 $500,000. So
Yeah.
the consultants that did that one, the most recent one in 2012, will be using them. And so we can produce a new PEA for Terry in about 6 to 8 weeks after giving the green light for under $100,000. So that excites me because I think, again, if we can demonstrate that we have a PEA and that may lead to a pre-feas, then that should help us with getting some market recognition for what we've acquired.
And so what's the rationale of the vendor here?
Well, Cadillac, interestingly enough, they merged with a company called Richview back in 2012, and by my math, they spent about 45 million in terms of a share deal to acquire the Terry project. They had other projects going on concurrently outside of North America as well, and I think they got spread a little bit thin. They offered they entered into an option agreement with a company called Northern Fox, who was private in 2016, and they were going to basically retain a 30% interest in the project, and Northern Fox was required to invest upwards to about 15 million to move it forward. For various reasons, Northern Fox wasn't able to do that. So when we looked at it, we said, I don't want an option. We want to own it outright. And so they're looking at it that Cadillac will participate. They're going to be getting about 13.5 million shares. So they will be a large shareholder, not approximately 10% for argument's sake. So they'll participate in the success of Braveheart at Bull River. They'll still retain an NSR on the project, and they won't have to put any money up. So that'll allow them to concentrate on their tungsten project and anything else they have in the pipeline. So really for us, we saw a company that was beat up in the market, difficult to raise money when you're down at 2 cents. So we just felt that it could be a win-win where you get call it a more pure copper play, but they liked the fact that we had an experienced mining management team, and they liked the idea that we would be seeing positive cash flow from Bull River within a year. So it was kind of a combination, and hopefully for us, a bit of a perfect storm, because this Cadillac was valued much higher in the market in 2000 and 2010 than they are today.
Yeah, certainly. Wow. Well done finding this opportunity and making a win-win. It looks like a win-win deal here with Cadillac and you guys. Really, if they have their hands full with the tungsten thing too, that can be very tough as well. The world needs a lot of that, but not easy.
Sorry, I think the other thing that is interesting is that I like the idea of geographical diversification. Mm-hmm. So this is kind of the Braveheart model where you want favorable mining jurisdictions, and I love Canada. I just think that to be in BC and Ontario gives us some flexibility when we're close to mining communities and infrastructure. It's I think it's just a really interesting formula. So without pouring cold water on our friends up in the Golden Triangle, our projects are not infrastructurally challenged.
Yeah.
And there's no seasonality about what we're doing here. So I've worked in the Northwest Territories up above the tree line, and we're not competing with having to fly people to work and overhaul fuel and all the kind of challenges that you have in the north. So I just think that oftentimes location is underestimated by people when they look at projects. So location is often not really configured when somebody does a PEA.
You can assume a lot in a PEA, right? You can make a lot of big assumptions. looking at this 3D image, I wonder, were any of these, was there ever any underground mining? I can see the development, but did they do any, and what kind of method were they planning here?
Yeah, so it was, I mean, the shaft was sunk, three compartment shaft. They have lateral developments, and so they were really getting into the ore bodies in the underground. Most of the mining was done originally in the open pits, but I'm of the view that a significant portion of the resource is, excuse me, is going to be accessible. And my belief is in all likelihood, we'll use some form of a combination of either mechanized cut and fill or long hole. But, you know, until we get into the mine plans and look at how the stoping designs were done, you know, we'll learn more. We've engaged a particular engineer that was intimately familiar, that actually did the underground developments with the contractor back in 1981. So
Good.
a lot for us to learn, but the first prize really was to secure the asset.
Yep.
My understanding from them is that the ground in general terms was pretty good, and it was a relatively dry mine. So those are some of the kind of things I look at.
Yep.
But frankly, I mean, until we can get into the database and manipulate a little bit, I think we'll learn a lot, but we just really need to acquire it.
Looks like a great spot to build a mine, you know, in Ontario, right? Classic stuff, and the history of it there is, it's something. So this is
Yeah,
it.
yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, right now, the town of Pickle Lake is really the jumping off point for the
Yeah.
all-weather road that goes to Newmont's Musselwhite operation. And there was grid power right to site, but the main transmission line comes right through the town of Pickle Lake. So apart from not having enough hotels in the area, it's going to be an area that I think is going to be quite exciting. It's up near the Ring of Fire, and I think that part of northwestern Ontario is going to see a lot of attention, and that should be the benefit of towns like Dryden and some of the other towns in the area.
Musselwhite too, big deal.
Yeah, and I mean, it's been around for a while, but my understanding is it still has some legs to it. So,
Yeah, and brownfields, you know, there's
mhm.
all it takes is for them to shoot a big hole off from an underground location and hit something new that nobody expected, and then they're, you know, then they're on to another decade of mine life. It takes a lot of work to show that and all, of course, but
Well, and the good thing too is that the, you know, government has decided to actually, they've got a major power line extension from the town of Pickle Lake to some of the northern communities. So I think when you've got multiple projects, then we actually have a power sharing agreement with Musselwhite going forward. And arguably, when if government doesn't have to advance too much in terms of infrastructure,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
always a benefit. And if they are required to support several mines, that's obviously a benefit as well. And I could see just even the little town of Pickle Lake could become more of a little booming community again.
I love the small scale equipment that you got at Bull River too. 750 ton per day. Yes, right. And very different location. Obviously, we're in BC with this one. Um,
Yeah,
but
so, you
what a
know, in
setup.
terms of Bull River, you know, our equipment is a little dated, but what I like about that is that the previous operators, they invested over $60 million in about 22 kilometers of tunnels. So it's
Oh,
been
really?
filled out on 7 different horizons in the ore zone. If you go underground, you can actually see, we do have cobalt throughout the property.
Yeah.
You can see cobalt bloom on the walls, but again, it's at this point, it's not high enough grade for us to separate. But the fact that the tunnels are in place, once we decide to go back mining underground, we'll have ability to really determine under our mine plan which elevation we want to go to first. So it's a bit of a miner's dream in my mind, where
Yes.
you're not chasing the deposit top down, but you actually get under it. And then from there you can mine up. And then if we want to advance the decline further into the structures, we can do that and then use that material for fill. I'd
Yeah.
note that, in our previous press releases in Q1, we actually intersected the same structures that we have at Bull River 115 meters below the bottom workings. So the bottom workings are 350 meters below surface. We know that we have an ore body or mineralized material 115 meters below, and there's no reason that those structures can't go further to depth. So while we only show about a 6.5-year project now,
Yep.
depending on the mining rate,
Yep.
I think it's very reasonable that Bull River could be a 20-year mine project.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Good for you. Again, and it's about sizing too. Looking at all this exposure of ore zones across the deposit here, vertically and horizontal. There's a lot of exposure, as you say. And if you're running a mill that's not, really, really hungry, and you can pick and choose, and you can go and, subject to the mineability of this, you can go and mine a little bit, focus on the high grade. If you get high grade from here and high grade from there, you can sequence that in a somewhat, more creative way. Make sure you're putting higher grade material through first.
Well, to that point, in British Columbia, there's a finite number of facilities, milling facilities that could accept a toll feed. I would see that there's a number of miners that are going after smaller, higher grade deposits, but they have nowhere to truck their ore to. So we see ourselves potentially like regionally situated, and depending on what other products are out there, to have a permitted mill we're planning to use what's called dry stack tailings or filtered tailings, which is considered in BC now to be one of the best available technologies. So government, I know, will be receptive to that strategy as compared to building one of the old conventional tailings ponds with the large earth structures and then effluent and material inside. So we're trying again to use technologies that are proven and that are suited to what we're trying to do. Dry stack wouldn't necessarily work at a 50,000 ton a day operation, but if you're mining at a couple thousand, we can afford to integrate that into our
Yeah.
operating costs.
And maybe in a toll milling situation too. Is that in the cards maybe for you?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things when I first joined the company 2.5 years ago, we had an option to acquire a high-grade gold project near Nelson, BC. And actually, I first went to visit Bull River in anticipation, looking for a mill. As it turned out, I found a property that was significantly developed, way beyond my understanding.
Amazing.
So at that time, we talked about pre-concentration at the Alpine mine, where we would then truck a high-grade gold ore. We would install a gravity circuit in front of the ball mill, and we could batch,
Perfect.
a product. So that's
Yeah.
still available to us, and I think for certain the initial surface stockpile has about $23 million metal value. We can assess that we may want to supplement our own feeds going forward with a
Yeah.
higher grade feed from another project if it can support economic trucking.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Wonderful. All the details here that come in with production for people who are going to do their homework and come and talk to you more. I'm sure there's some interest, especially rising copper prices here and everything.
Yeah, I mean, we saw yesterday, I think 315, I believe it fell back a bit today, but certainly the copper price is improving, and
Yeah.
we benefit. When we purchased the Bull River mine, I think we had gold prices closer to 1,200 and silver at about $14 an ounce. So, those, although they only represent 22%, they've had a significant increase in call it metal value add credits.
Well, and we're looking at these numbers here with your paybacks, and versus your mine life and things, right? Pretty impressive stuff. And I don't know, those are probably not top ticked to current prices either. right? There's probably some room for even those numbers to go up.
Yes,
Um, yeah,
I would agree. And I mean, some people have been critical saying, well, why did you, that's kind of a small project. What are you going to do next? Well, when we bought Bull River, it was a step change from what we had before. It on its own, I think, is a company maker. And
yeah.
I think like anything, we would be attempting to replace the ore we mine on an annual basis. And then, of course, if we can bring the Terry mine along stream as well, it just gives us that much more of momentum.
Well done. I love it. Great plan all around. And so I've asked some people on the street about the stock and the capital structure. So there's a debenture here. What's the deal?
Yeah, so we've currently got $8.6 million of debt. So I'll start off that we have 5 million from Matlock Farms. Aaron Matlock is a officer and a director of the company. He's also a senior secured creditor. Aaron lent us the money to basically unscramble the mess that Purcell was, where we had to remove some problematic shareholders and basically restructure a plan of arrangement. So Aaron's interest is accruing. It's relatively expensive at 14.8%.
Yep.
And we were looking for ways to either replace that or reduce it. I mean, he's quite interested to really have his loan replaced or paid off. The debenture is interesting. It was one of the key components to purchase the mine. The debenture was held by what's called a debtor in possession or a DIP lender. So under the previous restructuring of Purcell Basin Minerals in 2010 to 2014, the DIP lender advanced $10 million, which accrued interest. And so they were owed about 17 million when it went to court, which was the proof of claim. We offered 7 million. 1 million was in the form of shares of Braveheart, which we issued previously, and a $6 million debenture. So the DEB accrues interest originally at 0, 1, and 2% over the first 3 years. We recently added a fourth and fifth year at 5% on each year.
Yep.
I think it was really a credit to the note holders themselves and the company. We were able to approach the note holders and allow them to convert 40% or 2.4 million of the debenture debt into equity, but at 20 cents per share. So at the time, 2 months ago, we were trading at 12.5 cents, but they still were interested to convert. So
Yep.
some of the shareholders have been around that story since the 70s and 80s and wanted an opportunity to have at least a bit of an exit strategy. So we thought this was a win-win. So now we have 5 remaining with Mr. Matlock and 3.6 with the DEB holders. But the debenture is accruing interest this year at 1%, next year at 2%. So if we can get our share price moving up between 20 and 30 cents, then there will be conversations with the debenture holders to do the full conversion and eliminate that in its entirety.
And the interest payments that accrue, those are being added on. They're not being settled in shares or anything like
No,
that.
they're just being added on. But like I say, so they're being accrued on an annual basis. And so this year it's 1%, next year it's 2%, and then it's 5 and 5. But I'm quite convinced that in 2 years' time, the Bull River mine will be running, and there'll be enough proceeds from the milling of the stockpile alone that we might elect to pay the debenture back, or but we'll certainly be able to remove any of the debt that is accruing, expensive interest.
Well, and so what about for Bull River? Um, I guess the financing plan and economic studies.
Yeah.
Um,
So right now, I have not begun a PEA or a pre-fees or a fees on Bull River. It was our belief that we'd acquired an asset that had $35 million of surface infrastructure, primarily in the mill, 60 million underground. So the advantage to do a PEA for $250,000 to satisfy the market when we need 5 to get it up and running, we just really thought that the best use of our money is to make sure that we do everything we can to expedite the permit process.
Yeah.
Because once we have a permit, we aren't going to need a PEA or pre-fees to bring monies in to complete the final the final project. So
Not in 2020, not in 2020, Ian.
yeah. So, but right now we're sitting here with, we have 4 key projects that we have to complete. We own the transformer that needs to be moved to site, reinstall flotation, install filtration, and then complete the dry stack footprint. So that's where we're really heading. So I'm not saying we'll never do a PEA or a pre-fees on Bull River, but if you're milling the surface stockpile, I would say that'll be a proof of concept because
Yeah.
we know the tonnage, we have a good idea of grade and what recovery should be. So those numbers will speak for themselves so that the actual value of a PEA, which is plus or minus 30%,
Yeah.
I don't know who I'm trying to convince at that point in time because we know that we need to secure another 5 million just to finish off the build. So we'll be looking. We do have some 15-cent warrants, 25 million 15-cent warrants that expire in January. So I would say that, I mean, that's one access to capital that it would be dilutive, but that could work for us. So it'll really, it'll be a balance. But unless unless we really feel that we're stuck, to expedite, like I say, PEA or pre-fees right now, this is not the kind of project that you have to demonstrate de-risking. So somebody else already in their wisdom drifted on 7 different horizons in the ore zone. So
Amazing. Amazing.
I say thank you very much, and we're going to leverage that where we look mainly at operating costs and a little bit of sustaining capital.
And is this a situation where you bought the company that owns it rather than optioning the property again?
Yeah, so in this particular case, I mean, we bought it through a plan of arrangement, and typically what that means is that you take care of the secured lenders, unsecured lenders, and even the underlying shareholders. So we own 100% now. There's no royalties at Bull River, and so we bought as I mentioned, we bought the actual shares of the subsidiary company, which is called Purcell Basin Minerals. And the reason we did that was we wanted to secure $152 million in tax pools.
That's right.
So we will not at Bull River pay tax for the foreseeable future, certainly beyond the current life of the current resource, we will not pay tax. So
well, that's valuable to you guys, but you think of how valuable that might be to a high income partner, right? Somebody who has some tailwind profits from rising copper prices, and all of a sudden
and we've entertained that. I guess the challenge is it's by nature of the specifics of the tax credits, be they CEE or CDE. Some of them are specific to the property itself.
Yep.
So we have tried to look at monetizing tax pools, but we were just of the view that there's no point trying to give them away at a penny on the dollar if in fact they're worth quite a bit more to us.
Well, or to whomever might come in as a partner with you on Bull River down the line.
It's just a matter of whether or not they're transferable to someone else's balance sheet. If they participated in the project itself, I think they would be it would be applicable. So those are things that we have wrestled with a little bit. And the opportunity, of course, is still there. And like I say, there's no royalties on that project. And we have had some conversations there's a number of royalty companies that are springing up that are now looking more at base metals than just the typical gold and silver.
And they've got money to put to work. you know, and even some of them, there's talk of syndicates and stuff amongst them starting to play together. A few of them come together to help provide financing that, you know, one of them might not want to take down all on their own. But, you know, really,
Well, and the other thing is that the royalty companies, if I was running a royalty company, I'd want to make sure that I had near-term production,
oh yeah.
and I could potentially actually offer a dividend to my shareholders. So,
And tax light, if they could be
yeah,
tax light production, if there would be you know, a lot of these things, they have that, but not all cases, right? Sometimes there's tax bite is pretty quick right away, right? So to have that holiday for a while too is a noteworthy for royalties. You know, they're taking top line. Taking 2% doesn't sound like a lot, but it's 2% of top line. It's a big take. It can be a really make it or break it, I think, for some mines.
well, that's why I've run a number of gold mines, and I'm always, leery to lay royalties on top of the ore body because sometimes that is the margin.
Yeah,
And,
yeah,
although our grade at Bull River is 2.26 copper equivalent, um, it's not a 4% copper mine. So you really want to make sure that if there was going to be a royalty, that it was fairly nominal.
yeah. Or otherwise, you're waiting for $4 copper like everybody else or something, and it's like,
Yeah,
no,
correct.
that's not going to solve the problem here. There's all this talk about the shortfall on the supply side, and you know, to have a story that's near term, fast restarts in there, permitting wise as well, financing wise, everything. You know, amazing. Yeah, to find the 7 levels, and none of those, they didn't mine out significant underground. There was
Well,
no significant underground production.
well, they actually did. There's 165,000 tons on surface that came from those 7 tunnels.
Oh, really? Oh, this is okay. All right. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah,
The surface
and
stockpile. Yep.
again, I get asked why did they not mill it, and all we can understand is the previous company was private, and management, they raised a lot of money in Western Canada. My sense is that they delayed trying to do the actual milling, uh, partly because they would have then had to probably pay back shareholders with dividends or something, and they elected. To me, I've never seen anything where you could bring. This is not low grade ore. This is run
Yeah.
of mine
Yeah.
material that is completely representative of what's in our current
Yeah.
indicated resource.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you have it here, it valued over $23 million, 164,000 tons of 1.7% copper.
Yeah,
Right.
it's our
So
belief that, I've seen the drifting, so the quality of the mining was pretty good, and the ore body sits at about 70 degrees, so it's steep gravity works.
yeah.
And, my sense is probably dilution in that silling exercise was 10, maybe 15%. So,
Yeah.
yeah, the resource equates, I think, quite nicely with the sampling that we've done of the pile itself.
Impressive. Will you do more of that kind of sampling? Is there,
My feeling is the best way to get a sense of the surface pile really would be to start crushing it. But I don't want to pre-crush it, assay it, so I know for sure, but then have added a rehandle cost. So,
yeah. Yeah.
um, the pile was formed from drifting on 7 different horizons over a distance of about 300 meters. So
And you don't,
I think it's like a large bulk sample, if you
yeah.
will. Those are pretty big drill holes, drifts that are that large.
Well, in that pile, you wouldn't go at that pile with an auger drill or something, you know, just to try and get some stuff down
Yeah,
from,
we've been asked that, would we do it? Because we have some people that are looking to help us pre-fund the pile.
yeah.
You can get carried away with assaying. I mean,
Yeah.
when the um, when the last technical report was done, the engineering firm that worked along with Snowden, they took 400 channel samples from the underground drifting. So that's just the ability to do that is
Beautiful.
significant. So,
Beautiful. Yeah.
uh, you know, I'm very comfortable um, that we shouldn't see any great surprise. And of course, because it's sitting on deck, there's no mining costs. So you've eliminated, call it
Yeah.
45 bucks a ton that you would
Yeah.
have had to pay to get it there. So now, you're really looking at milling costs and then the smelting and transportation smelting costs. So
And we talked about, at the outset, the new technology and some of the pre-sort, and some of the old technology too with the tables. Um, maybe there's some kind of a creative solution. Maybe there's some rehandling in it along the way. Yeah. But if you're upgrading, at site, before you move it to the mill, right? That
yeah, I think my strategy right now would be with the 165,000 tons represents 8 months. I
yeah,
think we'd probably mill that as is, as proof of concept, get some firm numbers, know that that was a diluted pile. And then subsequently, when we went underground, we might look at that new feeds from the underground doing some sort of pre-concentration. So we would kind of separate it either at the portal or
yep,
underground, and then just feed the higher grade feed to the same size mill. So those
yep.
are, again, I think there are opportunities to kind of optimize what we have once we've actually got positive cash flow.
New things at old places, Ian.
Well, I've worked at, like I say, three very complex, deep underground gold mines in Canada, and I still believe, you've got a as high or higher chance to find ore in vicinity or proximity. We have one of the attributes here. We have about 10,500 hectare land package. So we do have some other outcrops, some limited mining from 100 years ago.
Yeah,
So right now we want to focus at Bull River, but we've got a beautiful land package as well. Um, and again, it'll take some work, but uh, we'll continue to do exploration. But I think right now the best place for us to spend money at Bull River will actually be deeper drilling. And for argument's sake, if we could get some structures that might be, slightly higher grade, we were targeting an area that had previously seen 4% copper. That could change the economics of how and when you go deeper.
beautiful. Yeah, that stuff's a priority. And with all the old data from these channel samples on the old walls that you just mentioned too, right? You recompile that, you start doing some analysis there, you might find some surprises before you even have to drill a hole. Just reworking the old data, things could have been overlooked, and have it, because it was in a private company for those years, it's information the market doesn't really have either, so
Exactly.
it can be
Yeah.
impactful for the stock.
Yeah, so when we did the 5 drill holes this spring, they all intersected similar widths, similar true widths, similar grades to what's in our current resource. So
Yep.
that meant that we've effectively deepened the known ore body from 350 meters deep to about, uh, almost 465, I guess it would be.
Nice.
And there's no reason that this can't go down deeper if we can get good drill angles from underground.
Yeah.
I'm not against trying to do some deeper holes, much the way they did with Goldcorp and the Red Lake mine.
Beautiful.
So you just don't know what's below you, and you sure hate to walk away from something if in fact the grade improves at depth.
I can't imagine what they felt like leaving those 7 levels and not having mined, leaving the stockpile at surface, mining out of stock, leaving that must have been a hard time for some of those people involved in
Well,
that.
I mean, I don't know I don't want to profess what management strategy was, but I can tell you it was painful for the 2,900 shareholders.
Yeah, well, kudos to you for trying to make a win out of that. They're involved. Those shareholders involved? Did you buy them? Do they have any equity at this point, or were they settled out on the cash?
So what we did, and this was more gratuitous than anything, but we renegotiated there were two senior secured creditors. One we bought out completely for 2.5 million cash.
Yeah.
The other we set up the debenture with. The
Right.
unsecured creditors, we paid them 30% of what they were owed, but in shares of Braveheart to settle their
Oh,
issues.
cool.
And we offered all 2,900 shareholders a Purcell 5 Braveheart shares for every 1 share they had. So there was approximately 3 million shares held between 2,900 individuals. As it turned out, what we said is we're going to give you a 5-for-1. So, but you have to spend $1,000 on an admin fee for us to do the transaction, regardless of what your holdings are. So people that held over 2,000 shares, it made sense to convert, because essentially they were breaking even if they converted. So it ended up that 118 individuals or families from the 2,900, it made economic sense. The others had lost so much that it didn't make sense to, they'd be better to buy shares of Braveheart in the market if they believed in it. So again, there's always going to be winners and losers, if you will. And unfortunately, a number of our shareholders are elderly, and former shareholders were elderly,
Yeah.
and invested significant savings into a prospective junior miner. So
Yeah.
I've talked to many of them, and it's disheartening what happened and the guidance that they followed. But at the end of the day, we saw value in the actual assets, and we felt that we could create some value for those that wanted to stay with it.
Yeah. Well done. It's, it's the history is of some of these projects is just heartbreaking. But then the opportunity that's created and the wreckage of them, right, is big opportunity, and you get the timing right in the cycles, the wind at your back, and all of a sudden things can move really quickly.
Yeah,
Amazing.
I agree, and I mean that's the thing. There's been numerous mines that have been, shuttered and then reopened and shuttered
Yeah.
again, and then sometimes if you're in the right position, that you actually find the presence of economic or very favorable mineralized material. It's partly being in the right place. And
Yeah.
what I like about this, and we don't have to miss a cycle here.
Yeah.
A lot of projects that we compete against in northern BC, I mean, you've got seasonal drilling. You
Yeah.
talk about different studies that'll be done 3 years out, and
No.
this is a brownfields operation that I expect it's not a question of if we get a permit, but when.
Yeah.
And I'd like to believe that we'll be one of, if not one of the next, one of the next new mines, if you will, in the province of BC. And I think there are certainly some forces afoot that would say that that's a good thing.
Agreed. Certainly agreed. I like to say lead from the front, right? This copper is going to get mined somewhere in the world. Let's do it from Canada, do it in Canada with Canadian companies, with the best global standards that we can in all aspects.
I agree. I agree 100%.
Ian, what a treat to meet you. Thank you. Nice to talk to you.
Okay, Peter. So thanks again for connecting with us on short notice, and look forward, if you have some follow-up questions at some point, feel free to reach out.
Thank you very much. I'll do
All
up
right.
a recording of this for public release, and I'll send it over to you guys to have a look at.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.